The wind howled through the jagged peaks of Mount Virith like a chorus of frozen ghosts, tearing at the tattered edges of Joran's thermal cloak as he stumbled forward, boots sinking into knee-deep snow with every labored step. His breath came in ragged clouds that vanished almost instantly in the sub-zero air, and his gloved fingers trembled against the strap of his satchel, more from exhaustion than cold. The bulky explorer had been trekking for 3 days across this desolate range, ever since his drop pod malfunctioned during atmospheric entry and sent him spiraling off course into this icy wilderness. His survival pack was nearly empty, his locator beacon dead, and his hope thinner than the oxygen at this altitude. He'd expected silence, isolation, maybe even death, but certainly not company. Then he saw her. She stood atop a narrow ridge of black rock, silhouetted against the bruised twilight sky, unmoving despite the gale that whipped snowflakes around her like frantic moths. Her skin shimmered a deep, iridescent green, like moss growing over ancient stone, and her hair, long and straight, flowed white as fresh-fallen snow, untouched by the storm. She wore a sleek, form-fitting suit that seemed woven from liquid metal and starlight, clinging to her humanoid frame without hindering movement. One hand rested on the hilt of a curved blade at her hip. The other hung loose, relaxed, as if she were waiting for tea rather than braving the wrath of an alien blizzard. When she turned her head toward him, her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and glowing faintly gold, locked onto his with unnerving calm. Joran froze mid-step, heart hammering so hard he feared it might crack a rib. He'd seen holos of extraterrestrials before, diplomats, traders, even warriors, but never one alone, in a place like this, watching him with such quiet intensity. Before he could raise his hands in surrender or fumble for his sidearm, she spoke. Not with a shout over the wind, but with a voice that somehow cut through the storm like sunlight through cloud. "Follow me." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a threat. It was simply a statement, delivered with the certainty of someone who knew you would obey because there was no better option. And Joran, half-starved, frostbitten, and utterly out of choices, did exactly that. He trailed behind her as she descended the ridge with impossible grace, her boots barely disturbing the snow. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, but pride kept him upright. Pride and the gnawing suspicion that if he collapsed now, she wouldn't stop to help. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, they reached a narrow fissure in the mountainside, hidden behind a curtain of ice that glittered like shattered glass. She placed a palm against the rock beside it, and a soft hum vibrated through the air. The ice shimmered, then parted like water, revealing a tunnel lit by pulsing blue veins in the stone walls. Inside, the temperature rose to something almost comfortable. Warmth seeped into Joran's bones, and he nearly wept from relief. The tunnel sloped downward, winding deeper into the mountain, and soon opened into a cavernous chamber that stole his breath anew. It wasn't a cave, it was a home. Smooth, organic-looking furniture curved from the floor like living sculptures. Bioluminescent plants clung to the walls, casting a gentle emerald glow. A low table held steaming bowls of something fragrant and unfamiliar, and beyond it, shelves lined with crystalline data rods and strange artifacts glinted in the light. In the center of it all stood the woman, arms crossed, watching him with that same unreadable expression. "My name is Vela," she said, finally breaking the silence. "And you are trespassing on sacred ground." Joran swallowed, his throat dry despite the warmth. "I didn't know," he rasped. "My pod crashed. I was just trying not to die." Vela tilted her head slightly, studying him as if he were a puzzle she hadn't decided whether to solve. "Humans are loud," she remarked almost to herself, "even when they whisper." Then, with a flick of her wrist, she gestured to the table. "Sit, eat. You reek of desperation, and it offends my senses." Grateful but wary, Joran lowered himself onto a cushion that molded to his shape. The food smelled like roasted nuts and citrus, and though he hesitated, hunger won out. He took a bite and nearly groaned aloud. It was delicious, warm, and strangely energizing. As he ate, Vela moved about the chamber, adjusting lights, checking instruments embedded in the walls, occasionally glancing at him with narrowed eyes. "You're not military," she observed after a while. "No," Joran said between mouthfuls. "Independent surveyor, mapping uncharted systems. Got diverted by a solar flare. Next thing I knew, I was tumbling through your atmosphere with half my systems fried." "Unlucky," Vela said flatly, but there was a flicker in her golden eyes, something almost like pity. Days passed, Joran's wounds healed. His strength returned. Vela allowed him to stay, though she never explained why. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried weight. She taught him how to brew a bitter herbal tea that staved off altitude sickness. She showed him which crystals in the walls regulated temperature and airflow. Once, when he coughed violently from the thin mountain air, she pressed a cool green salve to his chest that eased his breathing within minutes. He began to notice things, the way her white hair caught the light like spun moonlight, the subtle tension in her shoulders whenever she looked toward the mountain's peak, the small shrine in the far corner of the chamber where she knelt each evening, whispering in a language that sounded like wind through crystal chimes. One night, as they sat by the glowing hearthstone, Joran finally asked, "Why did you bring me here?" Vela didn't look at him. She stirred her tea slowly, steam curling around her fingers. "Because you were going to die," she said, "and death should not come so easily to those who do not understand what they walk upon." "What do you mean?" She turned then, her gaze sharp. "This mountain is not just rock and ice, human. It is a tomb, a vault, prison. My people sealed something beneath it centuries ago, something that should never wake." A chill ran through Joran that had nothing to do with the cold outside. What kind of something? Before she could answer, the ground trembled. Not a quake, too rhythmic, too deliberate. A deep, resonant thrumming pulsed through the chamber, making the crystals flicker and the tea bowls rattle. Vela shot to her feet, eyes wide with alarm. "They've found it," she whispered. "Who?" Joran demanded, rising as well. "The scourge," she said, already moving toward a hidden alcove in the wall. She pulled out a sleek rifle unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its barrel coiled like a serpent, its stock humming with energy. Mercenaries, grave robbers, they hunt relics of power across the galaxy. And they've traced the energy signature of what lies beneath Virith. Another tremor shook the mountain, stronger this time. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere deep below, metal shrieked against stone. "They're drilling," Vela hissed. "Fools. They don't know what they're unleashing." Joran grabbed his own gear, what little remained of his survival kit, his plasma cutter, his battered comms unit. "What can I do?" For the first time, Vela looked at him not as a burden, but as an ally. "You can fight," she said, "or you can run. Choose quickly." He didn't hesitate. "I'll fight." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "Good. Then follow me." They raced through tunnels that twisted like roots through the mountain's heart, Vela leading with unwavering certainty. The thrumming grew louder, accompanied now by shouts in guttural alien tongues and the crackle of energy weapons. They emerged onto a ledge overlooking a vast subterranean cavern, a place Joran hadn't known existed. Below, a massive drill bit, powered by a hovering engine core, chewed into the floor of the cavern, sparks flying as it neared a circular seal etched with glowing runes. Around it, armored figures moved with brutal efficiency, hulking reptilian mercenaries, insectoid tech scouts, and at their center, a tall, gaunt figure in black armor, face obscured by a helmet shaped like a snarling beast. "That's Karath the Hollow," Vela murmured, voice tight with hatred. "He's wanted on 7 systems for planetary desecration." "We can't take them all head-on," Joran said, scanning the scene. "But maybe we don't have to." He pointed to the drill's power conduit, a thick cable snaking up from the engine core to a relay node on the cavern wall. "If we cut that, the drill stops. Gives us time." Vela studied the plan, then nodded. "Distract them. I'll sever the line." Before he could ask how, she leapt from the ledge, landing silently on a lower platform. Joran took a deep breath, raised his plasma cutter, and fired. The blast struck the engine core with a brilliant flash, drawing immediate attention. Shouts erupted. Weapons swung toward his position. He ducked behind a rock formation as bolts of crimson energy scorched the stone where he'd stood. Heart pounding, he returned fire, aiming not to kill but to disrupt. One shot clipped a mercenary's shoulder. Another shattered a control panel near the drill. Below, Vela moved like a ghost. She scaled the wall with preternatural agility, her white hair flashing in the dim light. At the relay node, she drew a slender blade from her boot and slashed through the conduit. Sparks exploded outward, and the drill shuddered to a halt with a dying whine. Karath roared in fury. "Find them!" he bellowed, voice distorted by his helmet. "Kill the Guardian. Take the key." Vela dropped back to the cavern floor, rolling to avoid a barrage of fire. Joran sprinted down a ramp to join her, plasma cutter blazing. Together, they fought back-to-back, human and alien, bulky and graceful, clumsy and precise. Joran took a grazing shot to the arm that burned like hellfire, but he kept firing. Vela danced between enemies, her blade a silver blur, her rifle picking off targets with chilling accuracy. But they were outnumbered. Slowly, inevitably, the mercenaries closed in. Just as despair began to take hold, the ground beneath them split open. Not from the drill, from within. The sealed circle on the cavern floor cracked apart, and a wave of dark energy surged upward, throwing friend and foe alike off their feet. The air grew heavy, oppressive, charged with something ancient and wrong. From the fissure rose a figure. Tall, skeletal, wreathed in shadow, its eyes twin voids that drank the light. The sleeper, Vela gasped, scrambling to her knees. They woke it. Karath laughed. A sound like grinding bones. Perfect. Let it rise. We'll bind it, weaponize it, sell it to the highest bidder. But the sleeper turned its hollow gaze toward him, and Karatha's laughter died in his throat. With a gesture, the entity lifted the warlord into the air, his armor crumpling like paper. One by one, the mercenaries fell, either crushed by invisible force or driven mad by whispers only they could hear. Joran and Vela pressed themselves against the cavern wall, unnoticed. For now. It feeds on ambition, Vela whispered. On greed. On violence. That's why my ancestors imprisoned it. Cannot be controlled. We have to stop it, Joran said. How? My people sealed it with a ritual that required 7 priests and a blood sacrifice. I am alone. You're not alone, he said, meeting her eyes. Not anymore. She searched his face, as if seeing him truly for the first time. Not as a lost human, but as someone willing to stand with her against the dark. Then she nodded. There's a failsafe, she said. A resonance crystal in the upper sanctum. If we channel enough energy into it, it can reinforce the seal, but only for a short time. Long enough to escape. Long enough to find help. Then let's go. They fled upward as chaos consumed the cavern below. Behind them, the sleeper unleashed a wave of darkness that turned stone to dust. The mountain groaned in protest, ice cracking, tunnels collapsing. They reached the sanctum just as the ceiling began to cave in. Vela slammed her palm against the central crystal, and it flared to life, bathing the room in blinding white light. Hold it! She cried, straining against the energy surging through her. It needs a second source, a living conduit. Joran didn't think. He placed his hands on the crystal beside hers. Agony ripped through him, white-hot, searing, as if his very soul were being unraveled. He screamed, but no sound came out. Images flooded his mind. Stars dying, civilizations crumbling, endless hunger. But beneath it all, he felt Vela's presence. Steady, fierce, anchoring him. He focused on that, on her. The light intensified. A shockwave blasted outward, shaking the mountain to its core. Deep below, the sleeper let out a shriek of rage. Then silence. The crystal dimmed. Joran collapsed, gasping, his hands blistered but whole. Vela knelt beside him, her face pale but resolute. It's sealed again, she said. For now. Outside, the storm had calmed. Dawn painted the snow in hues of rose and gold. They stood at the entrance of the fissure, looking out over the endless white expanse. What now? Joran asked, voice hoarse. Vela gazed toward the horizon, where the first rays of sun touched the highest peak. Now, she said. We warn the galaxy. The scourge will return. Others will come. And next time, they may not wake it by accident. She turned to him, a rare softness in her golden eyes. You fought beside me when you could have run. That means something, Joran of Earth. He smiled weakly. Guess I'm not just a loud human after all. No, she said, and this time she did smile. A small, genuine thing that made her green skin seem to glow. You're something more. And as the sun rose over Mount Virith, casting long shadows across the snow, the human explorer and the alien guardian stepped forward together. Not toward safety, but toward the unknown, side by side, ready for whatever came next. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. The mountain held its breath, as if wary of what slept beneath its bones. Joran's burns healed slowly, the skin knitting into silvery scars that pulsed faintly when he stood too close to the sanctum crystal. Vela watched him with a new kind of attention. Not just caution, but curiosity, even concern. She began leaving extra portions of her strange, spiced stews beside his sleeping mat. She adjusted the thermal regulators in his corner of the chamber without being asked. Once, when he woke shivering from a nightmare of endless dark and whispering voids, she was already there, pressing a warm cup of tea into his hands before he could speak. He noticed other things, too. The way her white hair caught the morning light like spun frost. How she hummed under her breath while tending to her bioluminescent plants. A soft, wordless melody that reminded him of wind chimes on earth. And the rare, fleeting moments when her guard dropped. When she laughed at his clumsy attempt to mimic her blade drills. Or when she rolled her eyes at his insistence on naming every new plant he saw. That one looks like a grumpy old man. I'm calling it Grumleaf. But beneath the growing ease between them, tension simmered. Vela spent long hours at the shrine in the corner, her fingers tracing the symbols carved into its surface. Joran never asked what she prayed for, until the night he found her weeping. He'd woken to the sound of muffled sobs, so unlike her usual composure that he thought he'd imagined it. But there she was, curled on the stone floor before the shrine, her shoulders shaking, tears tracing luminous paths down her green cheeks. He hesitated, then knelt beside her, not touching, just present. After a long silence, she spoke, voice raw. My sister was the last guardian before me, she said. She tried to reinforce the seal alone like we did, but she didn't have a conduit. She swallowed hard. She became part of the crystal. Her essence, her memories, they're still in there. Sometimes, when I touch it, I hear her voice. Joran's chest ached. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he gently covered her hand with his. You're not alone anymore, Vela. She looked up at him then, golden eyes shimmering, and for the first time, he saw not just the warrior or the guardian, but the woman beneath. And in that moment, something shifted between them, fragile and bright as new ice. Their bond deepened in the quiet rhythm of shared survival. He taught her earth songs. She taught him the names of constellations only her people knew. He fixed the broken heating coil in the eastern alcove using salvaged parts from his pod. She showed him how to read the mountain's moods by the color of the ice. They argued over tactics. You can't just charge in like a drunken rhino, says the woman who once jumped off a cliff to stab a guy in the back, and laughed until their sides hurt over nothing at all. But the peace couldn't last. One morning, as Joran checked the perimeter sensors he'd rigged near the fissure entrance, he found something that made his blood run cold. A drone. Small, sleek, and unmistakably Scourge-made, its lens still blinking red. He crushed it under his boot, but the damage was done. They'd been found. Vela's face went still when he showed her the wreckage. They're testing, she said grimly, probing for weaknesses. Karath may be gone, but his network remains. That night, they fortified the tunnels, set traps of sonic emitters and thermal spikes, and moved the resonance crystal to a hidden vault beneath the sanctum. As they worked side by side in the dim glow of emergency lights, Joran caught her watching him again. Not with worry, but with something warmer, deeper. You keep looking at me like I'm a puzzle you've solved, he said, wiping grease from his hands. She didn't look away. Maybe I finally understand the answer, she murmured. Before he could respond, the mountain shook. Not with the sleeper's rage, but with the impact of something landing hard on the peak above. They rushed to the observation ledge. Through a crack in the ice curtain, they saw it. A Scourge dropship, black as obsidian, its hull bristling with weapons. And stepping out of its ramp was not another mercenary, but a figure in flowing silver robes, flanked by two silent enforcers. The archivist, Vela whispered, horror dawning in her eyes. No, they wouldn't send her. Who is she? Joran asked. Lyra Voss, Vela said, voice tight. Not a warrior, a scholar, a historian of forbidden relics. She doesn't loot tombs. She studies them. And she's far more dangerous than Karath ever was. She won't drill. She'll unlock. As if hearing her name, Lyra turned her head toward the mountain, though there was no way she could see them. Her face was ageless, serene, her eyes the color of dried blood. She raised a hand, and a pulse of energy rippled through the air, subtle, searching. She's scanning for the crystal's frequency, Vela realized. If she matches it, she can bypass the seal without waking the sleeper. We have to stop her, Joran said. But Vela's expression had gone distant, haunted. There's another way, she said slowly. A ritual, not to seal the sleeper but to bind it, to turn its hunger inward, trap it in eternal slumber. My sister tried it, and failed. But she didn't have what we have now. Our connection, he guessed. She nodded. The ritual requires two souls in perfect harmony. Willing, aligned, unbroken. It's not just about power. It's about trust. About love. The word hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Joran stepped closer. Then we do it. It could kill us, she warned. Or worse, fuse our minds. Trap us in the crystal together. Forever. He smiled, rough but sure. Spent my whole life chasing the unknown, Vela. Might as well go out with the most fascinating alien I've ever met. She didn't smile back. But her hand found his, and her grip was iron. They prepared in silence. Vela gathered rare herbs, charged the sanctum's conduits, and etched new runes into the floor in a language older than stars. Joran sharpened his blade, checked his plasma cutter, and wrote a final log entry in case anyone ever found his pod. If you're reading this, tell Earth I found something worth staying for. At dawn, as Lyra's team began setting up resonant harmonizers on the peak, Vela and Joran stood in the center of the sanctum, hands clasped, foreheads touching. Whatever happens, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me, he replied. Then she began the chant. The words were alien, melodic, rising and falling like tides. Light bloomed around them, golden and green, weaving their forms together. Pain came. Not the searing agony of before, but a deep, resonant ache, as if their very cells were rearranging. Memories flashed between them. Joran's childhood under Earth's blue skies, Vela's first hunt on her homeworld's violet plains, his loneliness among the stars, her grief for her sister. They weren't just sharing thoughts, they were becoming one. Outside, Lyra's machines whined to life, frequencies aligning with the mountain's core. But inside the sanctum, something else awakened. The sleeper stirred, not in rage, but in recognition. It sensed the ritual, the offer of eternal rest. And it wanted it. The crystal flared. The mountain trembled, not in protest, but in release. Lyra screamed as her equipment overloaded, sparks erupting from every console. Her enforcers fell to their knees, clutching their heads as psychic feedback tore through them. The archivist herself stared in awe and terror at the peak, where a pillar of light now pierced the sky, swirling with emerald and gold. Within the light, two figures stood fused, not in pain, but in peace. When it faded, the mountain was silent. The fissure sealed itself, ice reforming seamlessly. The resonance crystal sat whole in its pedestal, now glowing with a soft, dual-hued pulse. Lyra fled. Her mission failed, her certainty shattered. Deep within the mountain, in a chamber untouched by time, Joran opened his eyes. Vela lay beside him, breathing steadily, her hands still in his. They were unchanged, yet everything was different. He could feel her thoughts like a second heartbeat, her emotions like a familiar song. And when she looked at him, he saw not just love, but home. But their relief was short-lived. Days later, as they monitored the mountain's energy readings, a new signal appeared. Not Scourge, not military, but something far older. A transmission, repeating on a frequency that matched the crystal's pulse. It came from deep space, from a system long thought dead. And it was answering. Vela's face paled. The first keepers, she breathed. My ancestors. They're coming. Why? Joran asked. Because the ritual didn't just bind the sleeper, she said, voice trembling. It activated the beacon. And now, they think a new guardian has risen. One strong enough to wield the sleeper as a weapon. She turned to him, eyes wide with dread. They won't ask questions, Joran. They'll test us. And if we fail, they'll take the sleeper for themselves, he finished. She nodded. Or destroy us both to keep it safe. Outside, the snow began to fall again, gentle and relentless. But inside, two hearts beat as one. Human and alien, bound by sacrifice, love, and the weight of a secret too dangerous to keep, yet too precious to lose. And as the first starship of the first keepers pierced the atmosphere, trailing fire like a falling star, Joran squeezed Vela's hand and said the only thing that mattered. Then we faced them together. The first keepers arrived not with fire and fury, but with silence so profound it seemed to swallow sound itself. Their vessel, a sleek, obsidian crescent veined with pulsing silver, hovered above Mount Virith like a thought-given form. No engines roared, no weapons charged. It simply was ancient and watchful, as if the mountain had summoned it from a dream. Vela stood at the fissure's edge, cloaked in her ceremonial mantle woven from starlight moss and memory thread. Joran stood beside her, no longer the bulky, wind-burned explorer, but something more, something shaped by sacrifice, by shared pain, by the quiet certainty that had grown between them like roots through stone. He wore no armor, only the scarred remnants of his flight suit, patched with fibers Vela had spun from mountain lichen. He didn't need armor. He had her, and she him. From the ship descended 3 figures, tall, slender, their green skin darker than Vela's, etched with luminous glyphs that shifted with their breath. Their white hair flowed like liquid moonlight, untouched by time. At their center walked the eldest, her eyes not gold, but deep violet, the mark of a high keeper. "You have awakened the beacon," she said, her voice resonating not in the air, but in their minds. "Explain." Vela bowed her head, not in submission, but in respect. "We did not awaken it by choice, Elder Nasara. The scourge sought to unseal the sleeper. We acted to preserve the balance." "And the human?" Nasara's gaze settled on Joran, cool and probing. "Why does his life force echo within the sanctum crystal? Why does your soul resonate with his as if bound by the old rite?" "Because we are bound," Vela said, stepping forward, her voice steady. "Not by accident, not by force, by choice. He stood with me when all others would have fled. He offered his spirit to the ritual knowing it might consume him. And in that offering we became more than 2. We became a single will, a single heart." Nasara studied them in silence. Then, to Joran, "Do you understand what she says? Do you grasp the weight of this bond?" Joran met her gaze without flinching. "I do, and I'd choose it again, 1,000 times over." A flicker of something, surprise, admiration, passed through the elder's violet eyes. "The old rite has not been performed in 10,000 cycles. It was believed lost. And yet you, a human, unknowing of our ways, completed it with purity of intent." She turned to Vela. "You were meant to be guardian alone. Tradition demands solitude. Tradition also demands that the sleeper never wake." Vela countered gently. "Yet it did. And tradition did not stop it. We did. Together." Nasara was silent for a long moment. Then she raised her hand. The glyphs on her skin flared bright. "Prove it." She gestured, and the ground before them shimmered. A vision unfolded, not of battle, but of memory. Joran saw Vela as a child, kneeling beside her sister beneath twin moons, learning the names of the stars. Vela saw Joran alone on a derelict station, watching Earth's sunrise on a cracked screen, whispering, "Someday, I'll find something worth coming home to." Then came the test, a choice. Before them appeared 2 paths. One led to a grand citadel on a verdant world, Vela's homeworld, where she would be honored as High Guardian, her legacy secured. But Joran would be sent away, his bond severed, his memories of her gently erased for the greater harmony. The other path led into the mountain's heart, where they would remain as joint guardians, bound forever to the sleeper's slumber, never to leave, never to see another sky. Their love a secret held only by stone and snow. Nasara watched, impassive. "Choose." Joran looked at Vela. She looked back, her golden eyes filled not with fear, but with trust. Without a word, they stepped onto the second path, together. The vision dissolved. Nasara smiled. A rare, radiant thing. The bond is true, not forged in desperation, but in devotion. The sleeper sleeps not because it was forced, but because it was offered peace. That is the highest form of guardianship. She turned to the others. The prophecy is fulfilled, not by one but by 2, not by bloodline, but by choice. Then, to Vela and Joran, "You will not be confined. The mountain is your charge, but the stars are your home. We will shield this world from seekers. And you," she placed a hand on each of their shoulders, "you will teach others what we have forgotten, that strength is not solitude, but unity. That love is not weakness, but the deepest form of courage." Relief, warm and overwhelming, flooded through them. They hadn't just survived. They'd been seen. In the weeks that followed, the first keepers helped reinforce the sanctum with ancient tech that harmonized with the mountain's natural energy. They gifted Vela a seed crystal that would grow into a new shrine, one that honored both her lineage and Joran's humanity. And before they departed, Nasara pressed a small pendant into Joran's palm, a disk of living metal that pulsed in time with Vela's heartbeat. "A token," she said. "So even if you wander far, You will always find your way back to each other. When the obsidian ship vanished into the clouds, leaving only a trail of stardust, Joran and Vela stood alone once more on the snowy ridge. But they were no longer just guardian and guest. No longer human and alien. They were simply theirs. That night, beneath a sky ablaze with auroras, Joran knelt in the snow before the new shrine. He held out the pendant, now glowing softly in his palm. "I didn't come here looking for love," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I came looking for rocks and readings and a paycheck. But the universe had other plans. You've shown me that home isn't a place. It's a person." Vela's breath caught. Tears glistened on her green cheeks, luminous in the starlight. "I don't have a ring," he continued, smiling. "But I have this mountain. I have my life. And I have you. If you'll have me, not just as a partner in duty, but as your husband, your equal, your forever." Vela didn't answer with words. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him, deep, slow, and full of all the things they'd never needed to say aloud. When she finally pulled back, her golden eyes sparkled with joy. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times, yes." They married beneath the twin moons a week later, with only the mountain as witness and the wind as their choir. Vela wove crowns of frost bloom and star lichen. Joran carved vows into a slab of black stone that now stood beside the shrine. They sealed their bond not with rings, but with a shared breath over the sanctum crystal, its light flaring gold and green in approval. Years passed. Their love did not fade. It deepened, like the roots of the ancient pines that clung to Viritha's slopes. They welcomed visitors, scientists, diplomats, even curious children from off-world colonies, teaching them respect for the sacred, for the balance between power and peace. Joran's surveyor logs became legendary, filled not just with coordinates, but with stories of unity across species. Vela's teachings spread through the galaxy, reshaping how her people viewed partnership, love, and the courage to choose differently. And when their first child was born, a girl with green-tinged skin, white wisps of hair, and eyes that shimmered gold in the morning light, they named her Lyra, after the word in Vela's tongue that meant bridge. On quiet nights, they still sat together on the ridge, watching the stars. Sometimes Joran would rest his head on Vela's shoulder, her white hair spilling over his arm like snowfall. Sometimes she'd trace the scars on his hands and whisper, "You stayed." And he'd always reply, "I found my home the day you said, 'Follow me.'" Mount Virith no longer felt like a prison or a tomb. It was a cradle, promise, a testament to the truth that even in the coldest places, love could bloom, and not just survive, but thrive. And so, beneath endless skies and watchful stars, the human explorer and the alien guardian lived, not just happily, but meaningfully, fiercely, and forever entwined. Two souls who had touched the darkness and chosen, together, to bring the light. They built a life not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments, shared meals by the glowing hearth, laughter echoing through ice-laced tunnels, and nights wrapped in each other's arms beneath auroras that painted the snow in colors only love could name. Seasons turned, and their bond deepened like the roots of the mountain itself. Unseen, unshakable, alive. Children came, their laughter blending human curiosity with alien grace, filling the sacred halls with warmth no ritual could conjure. Joran never left Virith again, not because he was bound, but because his heart had found its true north. Vela, once the lone guardian, now guarded something far more precious. A family, a future, a love that defied galaxies. They taught the stars that difference was not distance, but harmony.